Are you all able to hear me in the back? Okay. Yes or no? No? I can take this out, I think. Hold it up.
That microphone's actually for a camera to record you.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll talk louder. First of all, I'd like to start out by saluting every one of you that's here tonight, because pretty much all of you are here because you want to rebuild the party. And I can tell you that we've never needed libertarians more. Why? Well, we have the central bank digital currencies coming down in the near future. I know most of you are probably acquainted with this. And the big danger in them are they represent the end of cash, and they also represent programmable currency, meaning that the currency can be restricted to have only a certain percentage for your utility bills, for your food, for the gas, for your automobile. So this is, in China, tied to the social credit score. And from what I'm hearing, there are folks that are totally shut down in the system and are basically living in the streets because they aren't doing what the political folks in China want them to do. This is coming, possibly before the next presidential election. I heard it was supposed to actually happen 2 years ago, so maybe we've been making enough noise. But you can see that this is something that we need to be concerned about, just like Windows 11 now having a snapshot of your screen every 3 seconds or so, and sold on the possibility that, oh, you might have erased something by mistake, but now you can recover it. But they probably can also recover the digits you put in to get to your bank account. I had, and the thing is, Windows 11 is so much of a digital hog that a lot of places, like my doctor's office and my public library, are going to have to replace all their equipment. Neither of my 2 computers can hold Windows 11. So overnight, this has been made obsolete in a lot of things. If you need to know how to get Windows 10 support for the next year, I have a URL I can share with you. Just let me know. But I shared it with my library. They were thrilled. So a lot of people are transitioning to Linux, which has kind of been a difficult thing to work with in the past, but I have a Zorin computer now, and I'm not having any trouble with it. So just a word to the wise. So you've never been needed more. The Libertarian Party has never been needed more. And the good news, though, the really good news, is that COVID woke up a lot of people. They didn't like to have to take an experimental vaccine in order to keep their jobs. We don't want to miss out on those people. They are ripe for the libertarian message. And I'm so glad that the advocates are going to be putting out those quizzes, because they may discover us all on their own. Unfortunately, we have sometimes missed opportunities like we have with the COVID crisis. And especially with the Ron Paul movement. Ron Paul activated so many young libertarians. And while we did get some of them in the party, we also lost a lot because of what our presidential candidate did. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I am going to take you through a historical viewpoint of, well, what I've experienced, and make some suggestions on how we can avoid having what happened to our party happen again. You may or may not agree with me, and that's okay. I just feel like I need to give you my 2 cents because I've been in the party for a long time. And actually, I sort of could see what was going to happen to the party as early as the late 80s or early 90s because there were certain signals that we got that something like this was going to happen, and we don't want it to ever happen again. I don't want to see us rebuild the party and then have it collapse again. So I'm going to start by taking you back to the early 80s. I was in Kalamazoo, Michigan at the time, and Cheryl Laux, a colleague of mine at the Upjohn Company, was chair of the county party. And she gathered all the libertarians in Kalamazoo, which weren't too many, as you might imagine at that time, 5 of us, I think, and educated us on what it meant, what the libertarian message really meant. We used Nathaniel Brandon's large records, you know, those things, the vinyl stuff. And we also used the International Society for Individual Liberties trifold pamphlets. And I know many of the old timers here used to take those to the county fairs. Basically, there were about 36 of them. They each dealt with a different issue of libertarian thought, and we debated those things for an hour or two until we were satisfied that we understood the application of the non-aggression principle, and not only understood it, how it applied to this particular issue, but how it solved practical problems around that issue. Then we decided we would run for office. Now, the first office we ran for was supposed to be a nonpartisan race, but of course, everybody knew we were libertarians. We had made no secret about it. So what happened is, even though this was supposed to be a nonpartisan race, it was done in slates. So there were 4 slates, and the first one was the incumbent slate. And we actually invited one of the incumbents to be part of our libertarian slate. We called ourselves the Taxpayers Protection Group. And this, I guess we would call this person a small L libertarian today. Well, the media wanted to stop us because we started being very popular because we were talking about lowering property taxes. That's a really winning position. And so they kind of tried to smear us in the press that we were libertarians, these weird people from another party. So we had to explain ourselves. We had to explain the NAP, we had to explain its application, and on and on and on. And people liked it. We came in second as a slate, and the incumbent who had been on our slate became mayor. Why? Because the top vote getter became mayor. And normally, maybe there were a couple dozen votes between who was the mayor and who were the city commissioners. But this time, there was 2,500 votes of a difference because that was the number of votes that our slate got. So he rewarded us by putting Cheryl Laux and myself on the Public Safety Task Force, which I have to tell you was pretty much of, shall we say, a nothing commission. But we were probably, very possibly, one of the first 2 libertarians to be appointed to such a position. Now, that wasn't the good news. The good news was later, when the city of Kalamazoo decided they were going to do rail consolidation. Now, of course, as libertarians, we were against that because it would have required us to have the biggest tax increase the city had ever seen. And we went to a meeting to fight this thing, and a gentleman came up to me, an elderly gentleman, and he put $200 in my hand before he even said anything. And he said, "Dr. Ruwart, this rail consolidation is getting its land by eminent domain, and my brother and I have built this bicycle shop after all these years, and now it's going to be taken from us. But, Dr. Ruwart, I know you are on our side because you are a libertarian. So take this money and fight it for us." this is what a successful post-campaign looks like, when people really know what we stand for. The NAP was so attractive, our positions were so attractive, that they were willing to put money in our hands before we even made the commitment, because they believed in us. And this is what we need to bring to the Libertarian Party as we rebuild. At least that is my opinion. I think the NAP is the biggest tool in our tool chest, and we haven't utilized it to the extent we could. Now, of course, I have to say that the Upjohn brass did want to convince me to back off. Why? Because Upjohn was going to get some of this land that was gotten by eminent domain, and that was a politically strategic move, because if Upjohn had come out against the rail consolidation, it wouldn't have happened. And the company I worked for, which I had been there for 7 years or so, they really prided themselves on being a good neighbor. So it was very easy when I was told that I should back off so that Upjohn could get this by eminent domain, that this was not the action of a good neighbor at all. And that I felt strongly, as an Upjohn employee, that I was duty-bound to fight this thing, because the kind of PR that would have resulted was not going to be good for the company. What could they say? Nothing. So I didn't get fired, and nothing bad happened. Again, the NAP and its application is the best tool in our arsenal. Now, this is what gives a lot of passion, because I ran for many offices after that. So many I've kind of lost track. But because I ran for offices as a Libertarian, what happened is I was invited for the next 10 years into government and social science classes in most of the Kalamazoo high schools and colleges. And before I even got started, I would put 3 things on the board. I would put the minority should rule the majority should rule the minority, and everyone should rule themselves. That's 1, 2, 3. Everyone should rule themselves was number 3. If as long as they don't initiate, and I underlined initiate, physical force, fraud, or theft against others. And if they do, they make it right again. Then I asked the students if they could choose how their government worked, what would they choose? Almost every student in the class said number 3, the libertarian ethic, and they didn't even know that's what it was yet. And then I asked them, how do you think your government operates today? Nobody. I think I had 1 student in all those 10 years said that they thought their government operated by the NAP. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is I want to show you how powerful that is. It's a natural inclination, and we recognize it because that's how we deal one-to-one with our neighbors. It's only when we're dealing group to group through government that things get tangled up. And of course, then when I explained the group to group interaction to the students, yes, they had some concerns, but by getting them to recognize already that it was the NAP that drew their interest, that they naturally wanted to embrace and have their government embrace, that was very powerful. And the reason I'm talking about this is I think in our later stages of the party, we've forgotten this, and I'm going to go through the signs that we forgot that in the hopes that we won't do it again. So I also want to address, before I do that, further address this business with the NAP, I also want to address something that's come up, and I think it's great we're discussing it, and that is all the infighting. And the infighting I found out about in 1983 in my first presidential election. My first I'm sorry, I said that wrong, the first presidential convention. And of course, I'm young and naive. I know very little. I went to the Texas party because they were hosting, a get-together kind of like this. And I said, because I was young and naive and didn't understand we had a news blackout, I said, we really ought to run a woman at the top of the ticket. And I know we won't do it in this convention because, we have 2 male front runners. One of them is going to get it. But, if we did it next time, I think it'd be a good idea. And Roger Gary from the Texas party said, well, the only way you can share anything like that at the presidential nominating convention is to run for president. So I said, okay, I'll do it. Of course, I didn't expect to get the nomination, and I didn't really want the nomination at that point in time. But I did want to talk about this business about putting a woman at the top of the ticket. Of course, that's because I was young and naive and didn't realize there was a news blackout. So people liked me. So basically what happened is the 2 front runners each had 40% of the vote and I had 20%. So as they courted me for their votes, I found out what goes on at the top. And I was not impressed. Libertarians breaking promises to other libertarians. We couldn't trust each other. How could we expect voters to trust us? So, the only way I could stay in the party after that experience was to run a unity campaign, which I did until 1988, when Ron Paul jokingly said, as he got the nomination, Russell Means gets more applause than I do. And instead of driving people out, which is what I had seen in other conventions, the loser left with all their supporters. Russell Means did not leave with his supporters. He wasn't super active, but at least he didn't leave. And he walked away, I think, feeling good about us, which was good. And I thought, naively again, that my job was done. But of course, as we found out, this is in our culture. The infighting, I think, comes from, well, possibly from Rand, Ayn Rand, because she said, judge and be prepared to be judged. And if we judge each other, we're going to have that infighting. But that's another story. Okay, here's where the transformation happened. We had a strategy session. I can't remember if it was the late 80s or early 90s. Someone who, I don't know if any of you were there. I think the people who were there, who might have been there, aren't here now. And in the strategy session, we were supposed to find about 10 things, 10 goals that we wanted, and we were going to measure them. LNC was going to measure them. And the one we fought about, I remember the fight being strongest about, was remain the party of principle as we grow. How can you argue with that? And so I realized as the arguments were made, we can't measure it, it's just going to cause more infighting, blah, blah, blah. I realized that there was not a dedication on some people's part to remain the party of principle as we grow. And that's where the ball started to roll. As time went on, instead of having our ideas win, we started to focus on winning races. Now, there is nothing wrong with winning races, but it became winning races. And if we have to tweak the nap a little bit or not say certain things, we should maybe stay silent on that. And so instead of having this passionate response that I had seen in the early days of the party, we were starting to look like Republican light, and we started having candidates for our presidential races that were well, ex-Republicans that joined the party in order to get our nomination. And they were not fully libertarian. Also, because if you want to win, you might have to compromise not just your principles, but other things as well. The ends justify the means sort of started to shape up in those races. And it didn't help us. You know, we thought we needed to break that 1% barrier in the number of votes that our presidential candidate got. Well, Gary Johnson got 3% in his 2016 race, but I'm not sure we got any more publicity than we did when Andre Maru was the first presidential candidate to win, first Libertarian presidential candidate to win in Dixville Notch, which is the first reporting precinct in the country. Because there was a news blackout on us, and there's a good reason for that. It's just like why Texas has to pay high filing fees now. We kept our ballot access too long, and the Republicans and Democrats don't like that. So they have these huge filing fees for us. Well, actually for all candidates, but you know, for us it's a major blow since we, you know, generally have to spend so much money. The LNC certainly spends so much money on ballot access. So the system is rigged. I don't think our candidates can win. If our candidates could actually be effective when they won, we would have seen Ron Paul have lots of bills passed in Congress. Did we see that? No. He warned us about the bills that were being passed. That was great, but it wasn't enough. We have to think of this differently. And I don't think we can sell our soul to do it. Our soul is the nap. That's what inspires so much passion. I mean, you know, in those early days, I'm glad you're clapping on that because I didn't know how that would be received. But, you know, in the beginning, in the times when I'm talking about, nobody put up money for our runs as candidates. We put up our own money. Nobody got paid for ballot access. We went out there in the trenches and did it for free, you know, because we were so passionate. And I think that's what we lose when we don't focus on the nap. It's kind of like the American Revolution. Do you think the American Revolution would have been won if our troops had played by the British rules of war, where they all stood in a line and shot at each other? No, that's not what they did. They used guerrilla warfare. That's how we won the American Revolution. It wasn't standing in line like the British wanted us to. So, you know, this is what we have to do, I think, as libertarians. Our ideas can win. They have won. I mean, we have the President of the United States talking about ending the income tax. It might not happen, but the President of the United States is talking about it, talking about getting rid of the IRS. You know, that's something. Gay rights, I mean, they didn't exist back in the olden days I'm talking about. They do today, and we were the primary ones talking about that, other than, of course, the victims of the victims of gay oppression obviously talked about it. But we were the only political party that stood up for them. And also the drug war. Okay, it's not over yet, but marijuana is legal in most states. Now, the federal government still tries to crack down on it, but you know, it's not like it was. It's not like 80% of the drug war is jailing peaceful marijuana users. So that's changed. Our ideas can win, and we don't have to win as candidates in order to achieve that. What we do have to do is share our ideas, and I think we haven't been doing that enough. Well, I don't want to say it was an observation because I didn't really do a scientific experiment on it. But my feeling when I heard candidates, especially our presidential candidates, talk about their platforms, what I heard seemed to basically give me the impression that the NAP was not foremost in their minds, and that they didn't really understand the practical applications of the NAP to solve today's problems. Now, maybe that's just my impression. So, I don't want us ever to lose the momentum when we get an opportunity. And we lost it with the Ron Paul young people. Why did we lose it? I don't know if most of you are familiar with this, but Ron Paul had, when we had Bob Barr as our presidential candidate, Ron Paul had a press conference, and he invited all of the non-Republican Democrat presidential candidates, including Bob Barr. And I'm listening on the radio to this press conference, and Ron Paul is saying, he's saying, Bob Barr is on his way. He seems to be late, but he's probably caught in traffic. And this went on and on for almost an hour. So I picked up the phone after the conference was done. I called National. I said, what's going on with Bob Barr? And the person who answered the phone said, you're going to be so happy. In a couple hours, you'll hear from Bob Barr, and you'll love what he's got to say. So in a couple hours, Bob Barr had his own press conference. And he said, I didn't go to Ron Paul's press conference because that was for minor parties, and I'm not a minor candidate. And then he said Ron Paul should endorse me. Well, Ron Paul had a problem because the Constitution Party candidate had been really helping with Ron Paul's campaign. So he was kind of torn. But after that, Bob Barr showed up a lot and kept bugging Ron Paul to endorse him. And finally, Ron Paul got sick of it and endorsed the Constitution Party candidate. And that cost us, the young people in the Ron Paul movement, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. And that should never happen again. And this is the danger that we face when we put people up as candidates that aren't principled. I mean, Bob Barr told Ron Paul he was going to be at that press conference. And I spoke with Ron Paul after this, and of course they kind of smoothed it over, but that cost the party, the Libertarian Party, dearly. That should not happen ever again. So how do we do that? How do we grow the party? Well, I mean, I don't have something for every little nuance, but one thing I would like to say, yes, we can open the party's doors, open the tent, but we need to be careful about opening the candidate tent. I think our candidates should be our best people who really know what the NAP is about, can really put it out there and talk about it in a way that inspires the kind of passion that I remember from those early days of the party. So yes, open the tent. But the problem is, if you do that, we need to educate. One of the things that happened after this business of not wanting to remain the party of principle as we grow, or having that as our goal, one of the things that happened was that we had, I don't know quite how to say this. We had people focusing on campaigns, how to raise money for them, how to get votes, how to canvass, but they did not teach how to speak about today's problems and apply the NAP. That got lost. What was said was, let's let the nonprofits educate our candidates. But there was no liaison between the national party or even the state parties usually and the candidates and the nonprofits that might be willing to do that. Now, one thing you probably don't know is that not only did I get educated by the International Society for Liberty pamphlets, but I joined their board, and I've been the chair for 15 years, except now we're known as Liberty International because our acronym ISIL kept getting us hacked. We lost our website 3 times and finally said, no, we're changing our name. Okay. And we are doing education. Now, granted, a lot of it's overseas, and really, the advocates are still doing education. In fact, one of my books, Short Answers to the Tough Questions, is from 19 years of writing a column for the Advocates for Self-Government. Sharon Harris asked me to do it, and I did it. And so it explains how to craft short answers for our candidates and gives some examples, of course. But I guess I would summarize this by saying the NAP is our best tool. We can never forget that. It resonates with people at a very visceral level. Secondly, yes, it's okay to open the tent, but the way it used to work is when people came in, we pickled them in educational materials, and they, instead of being a raw cucumber of a libertarian, they became a pickled cucumber, and that's how we talked about it anyhow. That's what we need to do again. And that way, a lot of good things will happen. We'll have better candidates, and we will also probably, I think, and I could be wrong on this, I would hope we would have less infighting because we would be discussing, just like we did back in the olden days when we were learning, at a very early stage in the game, what the NAP applications were. If we can do that, I think we'll be okay. But if we ever think we need to win races rather than having our ideas win again, we are going to see, in my opinion, we will see a repeat of what we saw in the last couple of years. So that's my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth. And I did bring some books just in case anybody wants them, but I know most of you, well, many of you have my books already. And I've autographed a couple that you brought in today that you bought when I wasn't around. So thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity for sharing this, basically this experience with you. You might not agree with all of it, and that's fine, but take it and, use it to help make the party grow, because we're really needed right now. Thank you.